Okay, you might have spotted this franchise leak being shared sometime around last week, and if you did, you probably had the same reaction most of us did. It's probably a fake. Come on, we're in the era of AI slop, right? People can make fake leaks all the time. And when you look at the actual details, it looks too much like a wish list. I mean, there's an Arthas action RPG, there's a live action show. That seems like bullshit, right? But it turns out, in thinking that, we may have jumped the gun, and that's because of this bit here, Camelot. This may be the evidence we need to prove the entire leak is real. And while it might be real, there is a dark, X-shaped cloud hanging over all of this. Because, of course, World of Warcraft is an Xbox game. But first, I've got to thank the UK government because they have made writing today's NordVPN sponsor really, really easy. The timing's almost too in the nose. If you're in the UK and you're a grown adult who would rather not be, say, face scanned or asked to upload your passport whenever a site asks, or are rightly concerned about the various slippery slopes we appear to be on, then you may already know why people are reaching for a VPN. Bit of context, since July, Ofcom's rules mean that age-gated sites need strong age checks, and the methods that they list include facial estimation, photo ID, credit card checks, all that stuff. You could say fine in principle, especially if it's done right. But it feels a bit mad in practice when you're, a normal adult doing normal browsing and some sites suddenly want a biometric scan, even if it's just talking to your friends, and if perhaps you just don't want to be exposed to any of the security risks that may appear from all of this increasing regulation. Nord gives you a bit of that privacy control back. With one click, you can be browsing from another region, your traffic's all nice and encrypted, your ISP and random ad networks get a hell of a lot less to chew on, which is quite nice. The same trick works for geo-locked content and regional pricing, which I personally use for streaming and travel deals. And they've got lots bundled in, like Threat Protection Pro that blocks dodgy sites, trackers, and malware before they even reach you. And that's especially useful if you're getting it for, say, the sorts of people who may not be super tech literate and could be at risk to those sorts of attacks. Now, you can grab our deal at nordvpn.com/BellularWarcraft. You'll get 4 extra months in the 2-year plan with a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/BellularWarcraft, link below. Right, let's start with Camelot then. It's the linchpin of all of this, and here's how things went down. Wowhead's data miner, Steven, recently found that name attached to some Heroic and Epic Edition game licenses. He then later confirmed that it was connected to a development build on patch 1.60. Not 1.6, which was of course Blackwing Lair, but 1.60. That's something completely new, and almost certainly it's Classic Plus. You can actually see the build yourself right now by going to wago.tools, and you'll see it's labeled Classic Alpha. Now, Steven mentions things like new races, and something called the Shen Dorai, which would, if we're going to translate our Elvish, come out to roughly Hidden Children. Now, to me, that sounds like a new tribe of elves, possibly connected to, perhaps, the exiled Chandrilar mages in Dire Maul. He also connects this to the Skyborn data mining that we talked about a while ago, and if you put it all together, it does paint a picture. New Sky Elves for the Alliance, and then these exiled Mage Elves for the Horde. Those are new factions that would actually be vanilla lore friendly. And of course, the existence of Classic Plus is essentially an open secret. Almost everyone expects that it will come at BlizzCon this year. And even better than that, if this leak is to be believed, it'll actually launch very shortly after that BlizzCon. Okay, so we've talked about Camelot, the thing that independently leaked out, and then, in this new leak, we see Camelot. Now, you're probably thinking the obvious. You could fake that fairly easily. Yeah, you could. But you know what people can't do? They can't time travel. And to pull off this fake, they would actually need to have done that. Okay, so this slate got posted, but nobody knew where it came from, and that meant people started sleuthing for a source. And as it turns out, it all starts with Reddit user Fifth Yacht. Well, once Reddit user, because the account and every post the account made is currently gone. Or they should be, except that nothing's ever really gone from the internet. The Wayback Machine has a copy of this exact image from August 2025. That's well before midnight, and well before anyone knew what a Camelot was, at least in relation to WoW. Now, digging through the post history and ignoring some of the not safe for work stuff, we find his supposed source. an ex-girlfriend laid off from the social team who was accidentally given access to this document. Of course, we know about the social team layoffs, those did actually happen. It's also true that with that being a public story, you could easily just tie your fake leak to it, but again, Camelot being there and then appearing in the present day in data mining does seem to be extremely suspicious. Though going back to the post, it gets more interesting because he even hints at a motive. He mentions Blizzard directors making cracks in meetings at the expense of, quote, disparaged people. Petty revenge and disgruntled employees do go hand in hand after all, especially if the employee is his ex. Okay, so far, we've got a source, we've got a motive, and knowing Camelot a year before anyone else did publicly certainly is suspicious. It is starting to look pretty convincing if you ask me. And there is more to this. The leaked slate also got Midnight's release date correct, being Q1 2026. That could have been a good guess, and honestly I think it was the obvious release window for that game. That's because we pretty much all know Blizzard are planning 18-month expansions. Except that this image isn't actually all of the leaks. Fifth Yacht posted more than just that image. In a comment made last August, they confirmed a theory. The theory was that Koresh was never the plan, and that it was redone from scratch to extend the Worldsoul saga. The leaker said that the next expansion, Midnight, will actually return to the Black Blood and the Worldsoul. Now again, this could just be a good guess, but it's actually panned out that way exactly. We haven't seen the literal Black Blood, but we did go to Harrendar, which was data mined as the Root Lands back during War Within, and in Harrendar we did find the same enemy types as from the Black Blood. And then what's said about the World Core does comport with some assets that Blizzard, well, allowed to slip into a patch 12.1 PTR build that does suggest that patch 12.2 let's just say, is in line with what our leaker has been saying. And that means that so far, our leaker has been spot on. But here's the thing, it keeps going. And this comment told us things that we have not seen yet. Okay, potential spoilers ahead for the end of the Worldsoul saga, right? So that's your warning. Apparently, then, we are going into the Worldsoul. Now obviously our current theory is that Xal'atath used the Sunwell to reach it through the ley lines. That's why she pretty much went shloop downwards, like the Dark Well, as if it was almost a water slide and she went into the floor. She kept on going through the floor and, we suppose, ended up in and around the Worldsoul. And if we're to end up in the Worldsoul, it's probably because we're going to chase her down there. Now the recent 12.1 PTR gave us a little bit of proof. Someone left a 12.2 icon in the build, and it's one that calls our 12.2 renown Radiant Core. That is quite the whoopsie on Blizzard's part. And it's also another point to our leaker. Who knows, maybe he's batting 3 for 3 on successes, but I'm actually starting to think he does know what he's talking about. But then it gets bigger. He claims Azeroth herself wakes up at the end of midnight to cleanse the planet, us included, and even becomes the final boss of the last Titan. And look, be it Void Corruption or the Titans turning her, whatever's there doesn't really matter much without actually having the plot details. But the word that does matter is the word he uses next, and that's WoW 2.0. And WoW 2.0 sounds like a sequel, but it's not a new game. His own slate lists 14.0 and 15.0, both 18 months apart, so same as ever for a modern WoW expansion. WoW is going nowhere, but what he means is a story reset. And that's really no surprise to me. The Last Titan is built to close out all of those big threads like the Titans, Old Gods, Azeroth herself, and to retire, perhaps, legacy faces like Thrall. And they're already laying the groundwork for whatever comes next. There's the whole mad Arathi Emperor who's off on the other side of the world, there's more and more Draenei living off-world, there are Legion remnants all over the place. So the story can get a clean slate. The A-plot can get a clean slate. The world itself has plenty of narrative threads that could be picked up, and the game that you're actually going to be playing won't be getting a clean slate or a reset. It still will be WoW. But it won't be the only Warcraft game, allegedly. Right, let's talk about Warcraft, the whole franchise, so World of Warcraft and everything around it. Below Camelot, there's something that we could have never dreamed of, honestly. A Warcraft Chronicles real-time strategy game with an anime series alongside it in 2028. and an Arthas ARPG with a live-action series just 1 year later. Now, if you're starting to doubt the leak at this point, I don't blame you at all, because this does just look like pure wish list stuff. But stay in Dreamland with me for a second, because I think it does make serious sense. First, Jez Corden, a journalist who's fairly close to a lot of Microsoft sources, has already said something Netflixy was happening. You see, back in April last year, he said a franchise was getting the Netflix treatment on his podcast, and then he hinted at there being a BlizzCon reveal. Now, aside from rumors and leaks, it does make almost perfect sense. Take, say, the Illyria short. It's now got 8 million views, and it really proved that Blizzard had something going on there. It and its Midnight equivalent are fantastic, and in them we see the brutal history of Warcraft translating to animation really damn well. And to Blizzard's decision makers, using animation to grow an IP is no longer a crazy risk. Now, as much as the Netflix Devil May Cry series has its flaws, it did drive Devil May Cry 5 to record high sales this year. And it's not just the East doing that. Take Cyberpunk 2077. Its creators credit Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which is their tie-in, with basically saving the game's reputation. So, animated series have actually become a way to revitalize and grow IP massively, and Blizzard already have the skills and relationship to make that sort of thing happen. And honestly, when I think about the content slop that is often all over the likes of Netflix, and then I think about the Illyria short or the Liadrin one that were done in that animated style, I mean, those would stand out, and I think they drive serious numbers. And then for the Arthas ARPG and tie-in live-action series, it's a similar thing. Live action is basically the same playbook. The Witcher saw explosive sales growth even without a new game, and that was because of the Netflix show. And that's even with the Netflix show having an iffy start and pretty much only getting worse from there on. And hey, we'd all love to see Henry Cavill as Arthas whenever he's done with Warhammer stuff, and there's tons of proof that it would be a massive shot in the arm for Warcraft. Sadly though, there's a part here that puts brakes on all the fun and copium, and that's the actual games part. Who's going to make these games? Well, let's start with a real-time strategy game. According to Jason Schreier, Blizzard have shot down any attempt to make an RTS happen for years. And looking at the rest of the industry, you can see why. Plenty of people have tried. A lot of them ex-Blizzard devs, and almost all of them have failed. Maybe the IP is the key here, but the big point is that Blizzard kind of has no RTS team to even try to put this together. And if they were putting a team together, I think we would have at least heard whispers. After all, we know there's a StarCraft shooter in the works, and we've known that, well, on and off for years actually. We've got it from a ton of sources, and Blizzard didn't even try to hide it. You see, job listings are often a bit of a window into Blizzard, and right now, there isn't a whole lot to see except for openings for Unreal Engine and open world shooter experience. Those are obviously for the StarCraft shooter. Now, if the RTS game was due in, say, 2 years, well, it would have been a year or two into development by now. We would have expected to hear perhaps about people from Frost Giant Games returning to Blizzard, or maybe some of the Age of Empires people from Xbox moving over to this project, and thus far, there hasn't been evidence of either. Now, I'm not saying I suddenly think all of the leak is fake, but this is the part that's hardest to believe. I think the easiest way to square the circle, though, is that this, if it is real, is a document. It is a document from a point in time. And as anyone who's worked in a big company knows, plans very often do chop and change. Now, the Arthas ARPG is a very different story, and there's one very possible path to this thing being real. Game headcounts swing fairly hard, right? And to explain that, we need to understand how games are made. So, the headcount on a video game team actually swings really hard. The way it works, and the best way it should be, is to start with a small core of people in pre-production, basically just leads and directors, S-tier people, for maybe a year or two. Then, whenever production ramps up, you hire hundreds of artists and programmers, you burn a lot of money fast, and basically, that gets the game shipped. And all too often in the games industry, the moment the game ships, most of those people aren't needed. So what do you do with all of those people? Well, in the worst case, you lay them off. In the best case, you've got another project ready to catch them. And here's the thing on that front. In 2023, Blizzard finished and released Diablo 4. Immediately, they'd have cut the team down to only what they need for the expansions. That frees up a lot of manpower and a lot of executive decision making. So there is a faint possibility that an Arthas game is there, deep in the belly of Blizzard, being worked on, maybe by Diablo devs. And the planned 2029 release date would add up perfectly. 6 years is exactly how long it took Blizzard to make Diablo 4's current version. And it would even help explain Chris Metzen's return, brought back to steer all of Warcraft, so WoW, the Chronicles RTS, and Arthas' story. So there is a very clear path to the Arthas game being real, but it would have to fight against a lot of realities, like Blizzard being nearly unable to complete new projects. Project Odyssey says hello from beyond the grave. There's the originally planned Overwatch 2 PvE lying beside it in another grave. And really, Blizzard's last 20 years has been defined by releasing a fraction of what they wanted to. But hey, Overwatch is finally recovering, and the StarCraft shooter is apparently real, so maybe something has changed. And if we take a hopeful, but I'd say not unrealistic view, this leak does seem real, and it doesn't even seem that far-fetched. Especially when you remember it's just Blizzard's plans from well over a year ago. And that's actually the key to this. What's key to all of this is actually Xbox, because of course, Activision Blizzard is now an Xbox studio. Now, whatever's on this release slate leak is at least 15 months old. And if we were to think about Xbox and Blizzard as organizations, well, there have been struggles, right? Microsoft have been cutting gaming hard and fast. Over on the Bellular News channel, we've covered loads of that stuff. As an example, we have the game industry is done with employees, which is covering a lot of moves to outsourcing and contracting. And then there's the Xbox bloodbath has begun, and that's because, well, Asha Sharma is leading a hell of a lot of change over at Xbox. Basically, a lot of studios are reportedly begging for their lives behind closed doors, Ninja Theory included, even though it was only days after Ninja Theory announced Senua at the Xbox showcase, meaning that even a reveal doesn't protect you anymore. But actually, this does mean something for Warcraft, and that's because Asha and her team have been very communicative about what their strategy is. They've clearly foreshadowed substantial cuts, but they have said that they want to invest way more money into big, proven IP. And Warcraft is exactly that. Basically, it's an Xbox who's rotating a lot of resources from bets that didn't necessarily pay off or don't really look surefire, and then putting that money, those resources, into things that do look a lot more surefire. Like, as an example, Warcraft-related stuff. So really, being owned by Xbox does actually make an Arthas game seem like a plausible thing to me. Of course, Xbox are the people who will decide whatever that game becomes, and will swing the axe at anything that's not already printing money. WoW will of course be safe, it prints money. But the real question is, the wild stuff further down the slate may not all survive the next round of Microsoft's maths. So, none of this is a promise, not even the parts that BlizzCon confirms, but Classic Plus is the one bet I think you can place with real confidence. The Camelot build is actually real. It is sitting on wago.tools right now. It comes from Blizzard servers, and BlizzCon is close. So, in my opinion, this does appear to be a real document. It is, however, just a document. Maybe there is another document with another slightly different slate on it. There's things like that that we just cannot say for sure. But I think that Camelot link really does confirm that this stuff's kind of real, and personally, I would expect them to put a shitload of money into the Warcraft brand over the next decade, because basically, Microsoft is struggling in gaming. We know Warcraft's a money printer, and Xbox's leadership have overtly said that they want to put more resources into the things that are big, huge IPs and franchises that they know work, just like Warcraft. So then, if you want the full picture on why Xbox is doing all of this to itself, then there are those videos over on Bellular News that you can check out. But if you'd maybe rather something a bit more hopeful, well, patch 12.1 is quietly fixing a lot of what Midnight got wrong, and you can see that video right here next.